My name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm 41, and the last time I saw my father show any real emotion toward me was the day he declared I'd never be anything but a letdown. The dark wood panelling of the country club's dining hall seemed to swallow every hushed word, every ring of silverware on china, every carefully controlled chuckle that evening. It was my cousin Derek's engagement party. He was the family's shining star, the Harvard Business School graduate, the one who'd become a partner at his law practice before turning 30. The whole Mitchell clan had assembled to honor him, and I, as was customary, was an afterthought, placed at the auxiliary table by the kitchen entrance. "Ryan's around here somewhere," I picked up my father's voice as it drifted across the hall. Senator William Mitchell had mastered the technique of speaking just loudly enough to be noticed while retaining the ability to deny it. Still indulging his military fantasies, I hear. Such a misuse of his abilities. I tightened my lips and took another drink of my wine. 23 years of dedicated service, and he still referred to it as indulging a fantasy. The Distinguished Service Medal sitting in its case back home suddenly felt heavier, even from 3 states away. "Isn't he nearing 40? Aunt Patricia's voice chimed in. "No wife, no children. It's genuinely unfortunate." 41, my father corrected her, with the same precision he once employed to cross-examine witnesses. "And before you ask," he continued, "he's still in that cramped apartment near whichever post they have him at now, just getting by on a federal salary." The laugh that came next was subdued but sharp. I recognized that laugh. It was my younger sister, Michelle's, the pediatric surgeon with the sprawling estate in Connecticut, and a husband who was a successful restaurateur. She had honed that specific laugh in her high school days, when her aim was to inflict a wound without appearing overtly malicious. "Well, he has his little trinkets, I suppose," Michelle commented, and I could visualize the dismissive flick of her impeccably groomed hand, though I can't imagine what use they are to him in the practical world. I rose suddenly, my chair grating against the polished floor. A few people glanced over, including Derek, who gave me the well-rehearsed smile he'd been using since our childhood, the one that acknowledged I was family, but just barely. "Restroom," I muttered to no one in particular and headed for the corridor. The men's room was thankfully unoccupied, a space of marble and brass fittings, filled with the expensive quiet that wealth could afford. I examined my reflection, observing the smile lines that had emerged over the past few years, and the grey streaking the dark hair I no longer bothered to dye. Dressed in a simple suit I'd purchased from the base store, I looked like any other man my age attempting to blend in at an upscale event. No one in that dining room knew that just yesterday I was in a classified briefing at the Pentagon, reviewing troop deployments with a 4-star general. No one knew I had dedicated the last year and a half to coordinating joint initiatives among 3 separate intelligence services, or that the President had personally shaken my hand following our most recent successful operation. To them, I was still just Ryan, the boy who picked the Army over Harvard Law, who let down his father by not pursuing a political career, who had failed to secure a wife, provide grandchildren, or purchase a home in an affluent area. When I went back to the dining hall, the topic of conversation had changed. Still, I caught the end of another comment. "It's truly a pity," Patricia was saying to a woman I didn't know. "Ryan had so much promise as a boy, exceptionally bright, but he made some very questionable decisions." "The armed forces," my father added, with a subtle shake of his head. I tried to reason with him, but he was set on throwing his life away. Now see where it's left him. I resumed my seat and prodded the salmon that had gone cold on my dish. All around me, conversations ebbed and flowed like costly champagne discussions of stocks, politics, vacation properties, children's successes, and business ventures. Derek got up to propose a toast to his fiancée, a charming young woman who was a teacher at a prestigious school and gazed at him as if he had created the cosmos. "Family is the most important thing," Derek proclaimed, lifting his glass. "It's the bedrock that enables all of our achievements. I feel fortunate to have been raised among such talented people, such high flyers. It established the standard for what I aspired to in my own life. His gaze scanned the room and rested on me for a fleeting second. His smile faltered almost invisibly before he regained his composure. After the meal, I found myself on the club's veranda, taking in the October air and observing the city lights twinkling below. My phone vibrated with a message from my aide. "Sir, confirming your arrival for tomorrow's event. Error 800 hours." I was about to reply when I heard someone approaching. "Not inside schmoozing with the rest of us?" Derek's voice had that typical blend of superiority masked as concern. I turned, putting my phone away. "Just needed some fresh air." "Of course." He came to stand beside me at the railing, so close I could smell his cologne, something costly and overpowering. "You know, Rye, I was thinking, if you ever decide you're done with the whole army thing, I might have a spot for you. My practice is always in need of investigators, people for background screenings. Your military background could be a real advantage for that kind of role." The condescension was so artfully disguised as kindness that I was almost impressed. Almost. "That's very considerate of you," I replied cautiously. "I mean, you can't keep this up indefinitely, can you? There must be a mandatory retirement age or something, and frankly, at 41, you're not exactly climbing the ladder anymore. Better to make a change while you're still able." I nodded, my face impassive. Derek had always excelled at this. It was like a friendly pat on the back while sliding a knife in. "The salary wouldn't match military pay," he went on, "but it would be consistent, honorable. Mom and Dad would be so glad to see you finally settle into a normal life." "I'll bear that in mind," I said. He slapped my shoulder as if I were one of his golfing partners. "Good man. It's never too late to start making better choices." The irony was not lost on me. Here was my cousin, offering me a position in investigations, completely unaware that I had spent the last 5 years directing the most classified intelligence operations in the nation. That the little trinkets Michelle had scoffed at included commendations from every military branch and 3 separate allied nations. I made my excuses soon after and began the long drive to my hotel. My cramped apartment was, in fact, a 2-story townhouse on the base, but I saw no reason to correct their misperceptions. Let them believe what they wanted. The following morning, I put on my Class A uniform with the same meticulous attention I once gave to a suit for a formal dance. Every ribbon was positioned with precision, every crease sharp enough to slice through paper. In the mirror, Colonel Ryan Mitchell stared back. Not the failed son or the unmarried brother or the family footnote, but the man who had rightfully earned every piece of metal pinned to his chest. The event was taking place at the state capitol, a grand edifice of white marble and towering pillars where Derek's practice had handled several prominent cases. I got there early and joined the other recipients, glancing at my watch. Soon, my family would show up for what they believed was merely another of Derek's professional functions. "Ryan?" A familiar voice made me turn. Derek was standing in the hall, looking at me with an expression I had never seen. His jaw was slack, his gaze shifting from my face to my uniform, to the silver eagles on my collar. "Derek," I said, my voice steady and professional, the tone I had learned to use with subordinates who needed a reminder of the hierarchy. What are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Patricia was at his side, her expensive shoes echoing on the marble. She saw me and physically recoiled. "Ryan, what? Why are you in that costume?" "It's a uniform, Patricia. I wear it for my job." Michelle appeared next, engrossed in a conversation with our father, and she froze mid-sentence upon seeing me. The senator's complexion shifted through several shades before landing on a pale, chalky white. "Colonel Mitchell," a young aide said as he approached, offering a crisp salute. "Sir, they are prepared for you in the main chamber." The aide pivoted and departed, leaving my family frozen in the hallway like figures in a display. I could see them trying to compute the word colonel, attempting to align it with their concept of the disappointing Ryan, who just got by on a federal salary. "Colonel?" Michelle's voice was barely a sound. That is correct, I confirmed, pulling on my white gloves. Although most of my associates at the Pentagon simply call me Sir. My father was the first to regain his composure, just as I knew he would. Ryan, what is all this? Is this some sort of charade? Are you in some kind of trouble? A genuine laugh escaped me. No, Dad. Quite the contrary. The doors to the main chamber swung open, and I could hear the buzz of the crowd inside. Senators, members of Congress, high-ranking military officials, and journalists. Derek's engagement party had been grand by civilian measures, but this was on another level entirely. Colonel Mitchell, the aide had come back. It is time, sir. I started toward the entrance, then stopped and glanced back at my family. They remained motionless, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. You should come inside, I suggested. After all, as Derek mentioned last night, family is the most important thing. The chamber was at capacity, with every seat taken and cameras placed along the walls. I went to my spot on the stage and scanned the audience until I located my family, now seated in the front row where the aide had led them. Michelle looked as if she might be ill. Patricia was looking around, as if searching for someone to let her in on the prank. Derek was watching me with an expression that might have been admiration if I didn't know him better. My father sat rigid as a statue, his public composure unfaltering, but his eyes betrayed a bewilderment I had never witnessed before. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of Defense started, we are here today to honor extraordinary dedication to our country. The recipients here have shown bravery, leadership, and selflessness in protecting American interests both here and overseas. He acknowledged several other awardees first. A Navy captain who had freed hostages in Somalia, a Marine colonel who had commanded peacekeeping missions in Eastern Europe, and an Air Force general who had transformed drone combat strategies. With each award, the applause was polite but restrained. Our final honoree today, the Secretary went on, embodies the highest ideals of American military leadership. Over a 23-year career, he has consistently surpassed all expectations, shattered conventions, and redefined what it means to serve with honor. I kept my gaze fixed ahead, but I could feel my family's stares like a physical weight. Colonel Ryan Mitchell started his career as a second lieutenant in military intelligence. He soon made a name for himself with his analytical prowess, his strategic insight, and his unwavering commitment to the mission. The Secretary continued to recount my career path, the operations I orchestrated, the lives I protected, the crises I helped avert. With every achievement he listed, I saw my father's expression alter subtly, like the slow movement of a tectonic plate. 3 years ago, Colonel Mitchell was chosen to lead the Joint Intelligence Task Force, overseeing collaboration between the CIA, NSA, and military intelligence. Under his command, this task force has successfully thwarted 17 potential terrorist plots on U.S. soil and has been vital in acquiring intelligence that has influenced foreign policy at the most senior levels of government. Michelle was clutching Derek's arm so hard I could see her knuckles turn white from my position. Last month, Colonel Mitchell personally directed a joint operation that led to the liberation of 12 American hostages and the apprehension of 3 high-priority terrorist leaders. The President himself has described this operation as a masterpiece of military strategy and execution. The applause was growing louder now, and I saw some of the other officers nodding in acknowledgement. For his exceptional service, his steadfast dedication to excellence, and his outstanding leadership, Colonel Ryan Mitchell is hereby presented with the Defense Superior Service Medal, our country's 3rd highest military honor. The applause was deafening as I stepped up to accept the medal. As the Secretary affixed it to my uniform, he leaned in and murmured, "Your father looks as though he's seen a phantom." "He has," I answered softly. The event wrapped up with handshakes and photos, with senators and generals addressing me with the respect I was used to in Washington, but which was clearly a shock to my family. I saw Derek trying to comprehend the sight of a 4-star general seeking my views on Middle East strategy. I saw Michelle's expression as a CNN reporter asked for an interview about my groundbreaking career. After the official part of the ceremony was over, my family came toward me cautiously, as if approaching a skittish creature. "Ryan," my father started, his voice tightly reined in. I had no idea. "That's the whole point, isn't it?" I cut in softly. "You never inquired, none of you. In 23 years, not a single one of you ever bothered to ask what I actually do." Patricia opened her mouth, then shut it. "I phoned after I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel," I went on. "Michelle, you said you were too swamped to chat and we would connect later. That was 6 years ago." My sister's composure began to fray. "I didn't know. I sent out invitations for my change of command ceremony when I assumed leadership of the task force. Not one of you attended. You are all occupied with more significant matters." Derek was now very quiet, his legal mind likely replaying every conversation we had ever had, every slighting remark, every careless judgment about my existence. "The apartment Derek brought up last night. It's a townhouse on base. I could afford a larger place, but my work requires too much travel to make it practical. The federal salary he was so worried about is quite generous when you consider the benefits and the fact that I rarely pay for housing or food." I paused, meeting each of their gazes. But the money was never the objective. The awards were never the objective. I didn't dedicate 2 decades of my life to the military to prove a point to any of you. I did it because it was important. Because the work I do saves lives and defends everything we supposedly cherish as a family. My father cleared his throat. "Ryan, I owe you an apology." "Multiple apologies," I amended. "But not here, not at this moment. This is not the appropriate time or place for a family drama." A young captain came up and saluted. "Colonel Mitchell, your transport is waiting, sir. The Pentagon briefing is at 1400 hours. "Thank you, Captain," I said, returning the salute sharply. I looked back at my family one final time. They were still there, like displaced persons from their own biases, struggling to align the man before them with the disappointing son they had created. "Derek," I said at last, "thank you for the employment offer yesterday. I'm going to have to decline, however. I'm somewhat overqualified for investigation work, and besides, I have a nation to safeguard." The walk to the car felt both endless and brief. Behind me, I could hear my family conversing in low, intense voices, likely trying to understand how they had misjudged me so profoundly for so long. The driver, a young sergeant, opened the door for me. "Sir, if I may be so bold, that was one of the most gratifying things I've ever seen." I got into the back seat and gazed at the Capitol, where my father had spent decades wielding power, where my cousin had built his legal career, where they had all presumed they were the main players while I was relegated to some minor league existence. "Sergeant," I said as we departed, "in your expert view, do you believe my family will ever get over this?" He met my gaze in the rearview mirror, his smile wide and clear. "Sir, I doubt they'll get any sleep for a week." That night, back in my hotel room, I discovered 17 missed calls and 43 messages on my phone. Michelle wanted to meet for lunch and have a real conversation for a change. Patricia was inquiring if I could help her grandson get an appointment to West Point. Derek had sent a long, meandering text about how he had always been proud of me and regretted not showing it. My father had phoned 6 times and left no message. I switched the phone off and poured a glass of wine from a bottle I'd taken from the reception. Tomorrow, I would head back to Washington and get back to the work that had always meant more than their validation. There would be briefings, strategic planning sessions, and choices that would impact the lives of millions who would never hear my name. But for tonight, I let myself relish a feeling I had never anticipated. The quiet contentment of being truly seen for who I am. The boy who chose the Army over Harvard Law had grown into a man who had earned the right to make that decision seem brilliant. The son who had been a disappointment to his senator father had forged a career protecting the very principles his father claimed to champion. The brother who never married or had children had instead committed his life to making sure other people's children could live in safety. It wasn't about revenge. It was superior to that. It was the deep satisfaction of a life lived by my own rules, evaluated by my own criteria, and successful in ways that transcended the limited scope of familial approval. And if my family now realized they had misjudged me for 41 years, well, that was merely a welcome consequence of being the man I had always set out to be. The medal lay on the hotel desk, reflecting the light from the lamp. Tomorrow, it would be placed with the others in its case. One more acknowledgement from people who appreciated the meaning of service and sacrifice. But tonight, it was evidence that sometimes the greatest retribution is simply to live so well that no retribution is needed at all.